Good evening, everybody, and a very warm welcome on this rather miserable Melbourne evening. So an extra warm Wheeler welcome to the Fifth Estate. My name's Sally Warhaft, and our guest this evening is Bruce Wolpe. And Bruce has served as a senior advisor to politicians in the United States and Australia for many, many years. He was senior advisor to Prime Minister Julia Gillard, and he continues to serve as her current chief of staff. He also served as a senior advisor to the recently retired Henry Waxman.
Yes.
Who was an influential Democratic Party congressman from California. Bruce was the Director of Corporate Affairs for Fairfax Media before, or in between those two gigs from 1998 to 2009, and he publishes on the ABC website. You can read his written work and you can see him on Sky News, except I think that's on Tuesdays. It clashes with this, so you can see him every second Tuesday.
I was on at 5:15.
Yeah, 5:15, there you are. You can have a complete Tuesday evening experience. And obviously somebody whose experience is, really, and his perspective on what's going on in the United States is quite singular. So give him a big welcome, please.
And I'm kind of amazed you all turned. Don't you have anything better to do on a Tuesday night?
Well,
talk American politics. I mean,
doesn't it show you the level of interest?
Yes.
I mean, it's across the world. You'd hope that people would be turning up for you in Washington or California as well. But it's one of the things about this election. I can't remember a more polarising and stressful election.
It's true, but it comes 8 years after the most unifying election. And that's how quickly things can change. I mean, 8 years ago, Barack Obama came out of nowhere. And really, he was a first-term senator. Galvanized the country, beat Hillary Clinton in the primaries. Why? She was voted for the Iraq War. He voted against the Iraq War. First African-American, first woman. That was his opening. It was like water on a rock until the rock broke. And he came through to win the nomination. And he won it more narrowly than she beat Bernie. She relatively killed Bernie Sanders compared to the tight race that he ran against Hillary Clinton in 2008. So the country at that time, everyone was together and united, and now we're in a really ugly, torrid phase, and that's how quickly the mood has shifted. And one other point, if I may. Why does Barack Obama care about this? Because he was elected for hope and change we can believe in. If after 8 years, Donald Trump is the change you believe in, then he has failed, and his legacy is at stake on November 8th, and that's why he's out there, and that's why Michelle Obama's out there.
All right, well, the three broad things I want us to cover tonight, and you've just touched on the first, the beginning of it, I suppose, is how did it get to this, where we have Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton in this particular ugly mess.
I'm not sure, but all my friends are saying, if Trump wins, can I come over here? And I say, yeah, your room is assured. No problem, you're in.
As long as, nobody who voted for him comes. Where are we now will be the sort of second thing, and what for the future of the United States as to the outcome of this election. But let's start with how it's got to this situation. Let's start with Trump himself and this remarkable run he's had that seems completely out of the normal situation, where it doesn't matter what is thrown at him. Up until recently, perhaps,
yes,
nothing has stuck.
It is really the perplexing problem, because we see in Donald Trump things that he says which would disqualify any other candidate at any other time in any other race. I mean, can you imagine, just going back to Obama, if he had had a rally in 2008 and Senator Obama had said in the midst of a rally, "I want to punch that guy in the face"? Can you imagine what would have happened to him within 24 hours? He would have been called an uppity you-know-what and yanked from the race within a day. And Trump can say that, and that was one of the nicer things that he said. And he survives. So you have to think about Trump and who, the elements that comprise his identity. And you have to go back in American history because there are several strands that I think come together in him. There's a touch of Huey Long. I don't know, some of you may be my age and you can remember Huey Long. He was a Democratic, demagogic senator from Louisiana who was a real populist and railed against big money, big oil, and so forth. And he was assassinated in 1935. He was going to run against Franklin Roosevelt. There's an element in Trump of Charles Lindbergh, America First, the pro-Nazi sympathizer. And for those who are literarily inclined, if that's a word, read Philip Roth's book, The Plot Against America, and the parallel universe that America steps into with Charles Lindbergh becoming president in 1940. And ultimately, the Japanese didn't get the memo. They attacked Pearl Harbor. The parallel universe ends, and so it's all fine. So there's some of Charles Lindbergh in Trump. There's some of Joe McCarthy in Trump, the great anti-communist crusader and demagogue who blackened people's reputations with his words from the pulpit in Washington. There's some of George Wallace in Trump, the racism that comes out. There's some of H. Ross Perot in Trump, the businessman who's going to fix things. And so all this is sort of an amalgam of him. But, it's still, and I'm still thinking through, and people will think through for a long time, how did someone like him survive the race and get away with what he was doing? And there are, I think, two pieces to it. He had a base which was not inconsequential. It started at about 15% of the Republican Party and grew to about 25%. And when you're in a 17-person field, 25% can be a winning hand. There was a time in February when it was clear to me what was going to happen unless he was stopped. And I wrote a friend, politics sometimes makes strange bedfellows, became friends with a really great guy, really older man who was counsel to Mitt Romney. And I said to him, this guy's going to take over your party, and he has to be stopped. So what would it take to stop him? Well, I think it would take every living former president and presidential Republican candidate and Nancy Reagan, and this is before Nancy Reagan died, to come together and say this man is unacceptable to the party. And he said, I love the idea. And Mitt Romney was out there arguing against Trump. He said, I love the idea, but the party isn't unified enough to come together to decide who the anointed one should be to stop him. Mm-hmm. And so it remained a divided field for long enough for him to be in a preeminent position. So that, plus this amalgam of personalities in an incredibly media-savvy individual who was able to show the cable television news, you're going to make millions covering me. And they did. And they gave him, wall-to-wall, unvarnished, unedited coverage. Trump is appearing in Arizona. Boom, let's go live for an hour and listen to him. And I think that's part of the explanation. But people are going to be studying this for a long, long time.
What is the media's role in this? Because we've had...
Complicit.
Until all the broadsheets come out, whether they're left or right, saying...
And there's also, there's a false equivalence here. Well, we got Hillary Trump on... Hillary Trump. We have Hillary Clinton on one side, we got Donald Trump on the other. There's kind of an equivalence between their argument. Well, no, I'm sorry, there isn't. There just isn't. But there, we're going to be fair. Well, I'm sorry, no, you're not going to be fair.
I'm going to ask you, my answer to this is just an absolute no at this point for him, but I'd like to see if I can be cracked open on this. Can he claim any legitimacy at all?
Yes. And the legitimacy is, another reason why Trump exists is there's immense frustration among his supporters in two ways. There's an economic argument, which resonates. American incomes have been stagnant for 20 years. So people are working hard, but they're not advancing, and they are very frustrated, and they're very angry about that. And those of you who travel to America know you're kind of one step away from catastrophe if you have even with Obamacare, if you have a major illness or an accident or something, there's just a sense of anxiety and insecurity among the American people, and he taps into that big time. And he does it with very simplistic, very sweeping, compelling messages. So that's part of it. and I've just lost my train of thought, and I can't remember the other part of it.
Well, his legitimacy in his argument, so the economic argument.
So you have a whole bunch of angry people. And then you have a strand in the Republican Party. The Republican Party is split between the base and the leaders. And this is where the Tea Party comes from, where the leaders keep telling, and this goes back to Newt Gingrich winning the speakership in the early 90s, and I'll tell you a story about Obama's inauguration in a moment, where the leaders kept saying, we will destroy the liberals in America, and we will repeal what they do. And it went to the lengths of impeaching Bill Clinton. And then on the night before Obama was inaugurated, the Republican leadership met. Obama had won this major victory, and they had dinner, and they said, we're not going to give Obama a damn thing. And there was not one Republican vote in the House for his economic recovery program. There were only 3 in the Senate, so it passes on a party line vote. So the leaders keep telling the base, we're going to deliver for you. We will redeem your anger. And they never are able to deliver it. Obama's still president. Obamacare is still the law of the land. The progressives are still winning some things. They lose midterm elections, but they're still enough to control things. And so these people are really frustrated and really angry, and Trump taps into that. So the Republican Party, because it has given in to the most radical forces inside it and been unable to take them on a journey to governing, that explains a lot of Trump's strength as well.
And is this the sort of direct link to Brexit?
In part. I don't know Brexit well enough to say. On the surface, yes, the frustration is sort of the same, although if there was a revote in Britain, I would think that the vote would be to remain in the European Union. I'm certain if Trump wins, there'll be a revote. we would see. But sure, a lot of the anger. But a presidential election is different than a plebiscite. And so I think these strands run deeper. I do think that Hillary Clinton is going to win the election, and I think things will turn out okay. But in the meantime, we are seeing this morass of emotion, hot anger, and unresolved issues that is really haunting the American psyche until this election is over.
Well, Hillary is the other part of this story too, and of all the people in the world to come up against Donald Trump, for it to be the first female true contender as a female president. But she's also deeply unpopular and has allowed Trump that anti-establishment message, I suppose. But explain to us Hillary's position in America and why she doesn't seem to be able to be loved.
I think it's because she's been on the world stage for 25 years. I mean, I like to say, if the Beatles were touring against Taylor Swift, who would get the larger audience? It's not even close. And so I think could John Hewson come back and be prime minister? I mean,
probably at the moment. Yeah, I reckon.
Don't tell him. Don't tell him. He might come back. but
I might vote for him.
But there is. I think the shelf life factor is the primary reason. And then I do think mud sticks. Mud is stuck to Trump, and I think mud sticks to her. And there is no doubt that tons has been thrown on her. It's funny, when she left the White House, she was very well regarded. She won election twice in New York as senator. She was a very popular senator. When she stood down as Secretary of State, she was a very popular Secretary of State. But her press has not been good. It's been, I'd say, hostile coverage. There's been the major media organizations assigned a journalist to cover her months before they covered anybody else. And the point was to dig, as journalists should do, and they do that. But I think the narrative of Trump and the whole Republican Party about her, and there are vulnerabilities because how she has acted in dealing with personal matters such as the emails and things like that, that does hurt her, and she is paying a price for it. There's no doubt. However, 60% of the American people believe that Trump is not suitable to be president, and 60% of the American people believe that Hillary Clinton is qualified to be president. So even with all the stuff, people can see through it and realize between the two of them who is best suited to be president, who is the more experienced, the more capable, who will do a better job. It's her.
And is that a similarity to Australia where really most of the time the population gets it right?
I think that question really goes to the system of voting that we have here. The compulsory voting, imagine if you had compulsory voting in America. Where's all the money spent and raised for it to get the vote out? Here the vote is out. So it's structurally cheaper and structurally cleaner. The second thing is when everyone votes, you vote in the middle. That's, I mean, it's, you know, center left, center right. There, people are trying to get the vote out to get the extremes out to prosecute your case. So it's skewed. And that's why you have, in a compulsory voting world, Trump wouldn't exist. And Clinton would be romping. So she asked herself, how come I'm not 50 points up? That's because 50% of the population isn't voting.
You just said the magic words, and you know, at the end of June, I think for the first time, Trump was actually slightly ahead. So it's changed.
But in June of 12, Romney was ahead of Obama.
Yep.
So
you now believe Hillary will win, and I think that's been the sort of consensus since the last.
Let's go back. Let's go to some data. In 2008, Obama had 69 million votes, and McCain had 60. In 12, Obama slipped. He had 63 million votes. Romney had 60. So the Republicans did not increase their vote from 2008 to 12. I don't think they're going to hit 60 million this year. And she can afford to therefore lose a few million votes. And the only thing I think stopping her is this question of enthusiasm in a voluntary voting world. Are younger people going to vote? It's a Brexit question. Are ethnics going to, Hispanic Americans, African Americans in particular, are they going to vote in the same numbers as Obama? I don't think so. But will it still be a healthy, significant vote? I believe so. I think the vote that's going to make a difference is going to be the Hispanic vote, because, look, if you're ethnic, you know on your skin where you stand with leaders, and when they come out and attack you, or attack your security in the country, or attack your heritage, game over as far as they're concerned. And I think Hispanics will vote in record numbers and will vote in record numbers for the Democrats. And I think that's why some states like Arizona is in play. That's why I believe Florida will absolutely come through, and some others. Colorado has been Democratic now for a couple of elections. That's where I vote, and I think that will stick. In 10 years' time, I think Texas will be a Democratic state because of these factors. And the Republican Party keeps making this mistake. In fact, there was an inquiry after the 2012 election. Why did we lose? We lose Hispanics. Why do we do that? We're against immigration. What should we do? We should fix immigration. What do you do? Nothing. So you keep losing elections. And this goes back years. There was a senator and then governor of California, Pete Wilson, and he campaigned on an anti-immigration platform in the 90s. Well, that's why California is a Democratic state.
The Republican chaos is, and you'll be able to explain this, that people don't just vote for the president on election day. And so it seems there's going to be a split with some people coming out just to vote for Trump, but refusing to vote for their House.
I think it'll work the other way. I think a lot of Republicans are troubled by Trump and will not vote for him, but they do want to support their Republicans in Congress, and they'll be either vote for Hillary or be silent, and then vote for their Republicans in Congress to keep a check on her if she's elected.
And then Trump's base presumably will come out and vote for him, but may not vote for their guy or woman because they've turned their back on Trump. So either way, it's going to be unpredictable. I would imagine you talk about that 60 million may well go down.
Yes.
Could it, to what extent could it plunge?
I don't know if it's going to plunge, but I do think,
I just want to hear it's going to plunge, Bruce. I'm slightly
why don't we say, how much is she going to soar? Why don't we say that?
Yeah, how much do you think she's going to win by?
We'll go to the Electoral College in a moment. Yeah. Not quite yet. But there are elections for the Senate and the House of Representatives at the same time. In the Senate, Democrats there are about 33 or 34 seats up, maybe 35, of which 23 are Republicans. So more Republican seats are vulnerable, and they're in competitive states. So the Democrats have to win 4 seats, net gain of 4 to get control of the Senate. I think that's a pretty good chance. In the House, the Republicans have a very strong majority that goes back to, again, this frustration against Obama when there could be a clean vote by the Republicans in the midterm elections against the Obama agenda. It's an awful lot of seats to recapture, so I think the Democrats will gain seats but fail in the House. But at the same time, the Republican leaders in Congress are put on notice again that they have an angry base, and so what are you going to do for me? But then, and later in the conversation, we'll get to what does that mean? And it means if we still have this continued polarization and hyper-partisanship in Washington, nothing much is going to get done. But should we go to the Electoral College for a moment?
Yes,
Can we put up, I have one magic slide to show you, okay? And since it's HSC week, you can do some math, all right? So we'll do that. In the American system, there's something called the Electoral College, and each state has a number of electoral votes which is equal to the number of representatives and the number of senators combined. So California has 53 members of Congress and 2 senators, and it's 55. And the total number is 538 of all the electoral votes in the country. And so you need 270 to win, okay? This is the 2012 electoral vote, and you can see that Obama had a very handsome victory. And I want you to look at a few states. I want you to look at Ohio, at Florida, and Pennsylvania. So those are the 3 biggies that he carried that have been traditionally contested states. So even if Trump can carry any 2 of those 3, and Hillary Clinton still wins. If you add up those 2 of those 3 and then subtract it from the Obama total, she still wins. She's competitive in North Carolina, so that was a Republican state last time, so she could get a net gain from North Carolina. She's competitive in Arizona, same difference. So the roadmap for Trump to get really to win is he's got to carry everything that Romney carried, all those states in red. I'm so glad here that the Labor Party is not the color red. You know, that's sort of a really bad thing. The Democrats, or at least, are not red Democrats, they're blue Democrats, so that's all right. Trump has to carry everything that Romney carried plus Florida, Pennsylvania, and Ohio. That is a tall order, a really tall order. In all the polls where the states are right now, Clinton is leading everywhere, Ohio is tied. And so, again, it's just very, very uphill. Now, you know, I follow this pretty closely, so let's pretend, Sally, it's Friday night and the lights are low and martinis and Beyonce is singing At Last.
Okay, it sounded great until then, yeah.
Okay, and then I just kind of lean over and I say, let's check the polls in Ohio. What do you think?
Yeah, okay, now it's sounding like the West
It works
Wing.
every time. It's a great line. Fantastic.
Yeah.
Let's just check the polls in
Yep.
Ohio. So keep your eye on the polls in those 3 states, and that'll give you a pretty good indication of where the election's going to be. Okay, that's it for that slide.
Thank you. You see so much red, don't you? No matter who.
But that's geographic
wins
red.
Yeah. I guess, my response, as the audience will gather by now, is, it's visceral. I can't stand him. I can't, as a woman, forget anything else. The idea that somebody who
he loves women.
Is a self-confessed abuser of women, that he can still be even a contender is just, and that to me is what makes absolutely everything about him illegitimate. Everything. I wouldn't care what side he was on or if he was promising to. It's just an illegitimacy, and I find it very hard to understand how you can even be talking about close to 60 million, or let's say he has a massive plunge and 50 million Americans, say, will come out and vote for him. How are we to understand American culture?
But that question will be an enduring question. I think the issue is, well, again, if you look at the math and you look at the polls, he's polling between 37 and 42%. So that's constant. So I think he's finally hit a ceiling. The other thing is that it's very hard for a party to win 3 successive terms in the White House. The only time it's happened since Roosevelt was 2 Reagan terms and George H.W. Bush. The rest have been 1 or 2-term presidents. So Hillary Clinton has a headwind of 25 years, her own personal issues. I mean, the Clintons, at the end of the day, they always want things their way, as well as trying to do some good for the country, and that catches up with you after a time and hurts. And then this third term factor. And I think it really is quite a strong, if she was running against a generic Republican, the generic Republican would be heavily favored to win because of the economic angst I talked about earlier, the desire for change, and wanting to fix some frustrations that reach into the household. And that actually she's been able to do so well with all of that against her is a tribute to her. And that is really underappreciated in two respects. First, when she campaigns, she is a good campaigner. She's not Obama, she's not her husband, she's not even Joe Biden. She's not Michelle Obama. I don't know if you saw Michelle Obama's speech. If you just Google Michelle Obama, New Hampshire, and take 30 minutes and watch it last week, and it's just fantastic. So she's not, but she does connect with audiences. Secondly, she's not unpopular in the Democratic Party. She's very popular in the Democratic Party. 90% of Democrats are extremely happy that she is leading them in this election, and they're very happy that a woman is going to be president of the United States. And if we go back to the primaries, just again some numbers, she had more votes in Democratic primaries than Trump had in the Republican primaries. So she had like 15 million, he had 13 million. She had a higher percentage of the Democratic vote than he did of the Republican vote. So yes, a lot of people turned out to vote for Trump, and they're highly agitated and highly motivated. But at the end of the day, the Democrats, there were more Democratic votes than there were Republican votes. And so, again, I think this is kind of underappreciated. And there's one other factor, and it goes back really to 2004. And this is the digitization of turnout in the United States and what you can do. There was this guy named Karl Rove who worked for George W. Bush. And Karl Rove is a really smart guy. And he was Bush's political director. And in the 2004 election, they had voter motivation down to the postcode level. So they knew if you lived in a certain postcode and you had subscribed to Guns and Ammo and, Hot Rod, they knew who you were, and they could reach you and have you vote. And the 2004 election in America, just like the 2004 election here, the Iraq War, unpopular economic uncertainty, was a highly litigated election that the two conservative leaders, John Howard and George Bush, won narrowly. And in the United States, it was done because of this outreach effort that Rove developed and implemented, and it was very, very good. In 2008, Obama and his team got it down to the street level. And that helped explain the fantastic turnout that he had. So even a state like Indiana there's this Australian guy, he's Sri Lankan Australian, and he went to work for Obama, and he's just really, really good. And he was, so I called him up, I said, what are you in charge of? He says, they put me in charge of Hispanics in Indiana. I said, that's fantastic. How many Hispanics are there in Indiana? He said, enough to win. And they won by 1 point in Indiana.
Wow.
And this guy, so they knew where they were and got them out. Hillary has inherited the machine, and it now operates at the household level. So they know they know you in your house. And I get emails all the time. They think I'm in Colorado, but I'm not. And I say, you could attend this rally tomorrow. And again, in a voluntary election race, getting people to the polls is kind of everything. So they're able to do that. Now we saw the strength of this machine in the primaries. She lost Wisconsin and she lost Michigan. Very bad losses. Heavy labor states, should have been hers. But the Sanders message was resonating. So she had to start winning, and the Ohio primary was next, and she beat Sanders in Ohio by 5 points. And then she went on to New York. Everyone, you may remember the New York rally with Bernie Sanders, and he had 100,000 people in Greenwich Village and everything. Fantastic, so did Obama. Guess what? Hillary beat Obama and Sanders in the New York primary, and she killed him in New York. And then she crushed him in California. And so this machine, you won't see this machine until November 8th. And when you do, if I'm right, you'll know exactly why she was able to win this election.
As likely first female president of the United States.
Can we talk about the first husband? No.
What does it mean for America compared to, say, Australia, to have a female president? And Also, what does it mean that she's had to beat the most sort of public, disgraceful misogynist in Donald Trump to get there if she does?
I think the character of the attacks against her have helped solidify opinion that A, they're wrong, and B, she shouldn't be treated like this. So I actually think she's going to have an easier road than Julia Gillard did here, and that other women leaders have had around the world. So I think she's. I think people are ready. They were ready in '08. So it's now 8 years later. It's 8 years easier to go with her. And so I'm not too concerned about it. And I think she could be surprisingly good because of how hard she works. And ultimately, she wants to put together progressive policies that are going to help people on the basics of jobs, health, education, economic security, and to be stronger in the world. I think it's going to be very straightforward.
In 4 years' time, of
Yes.
course, probably won't be straightforward. What's likely to, who might she likely face? And can the Republicans get their act together?
Well, we'll see. It would be, to have a fourth Democratic term would be really something. And that would be hard, which is why she has to have a successful, she's got to be a success. You can't dither, you can't mess around. There are problems the country wants solved. If you show leadership, I think you can be rewarded for doing it. Now, again, the Republicans, sensing the opportunity, would say, just like they did 8 years ago with Obama, you're dead. We're going to kill your programs. I think I would not be surprised on election night and the day after to say, I am calling the Republican leaders I will go to you tomorrow, and we're going to talk about what we can work together to try and change this culture in Washington. The fundamental problem in Washington is that it now has, from working here and seeing it directly and up close, Washington now has a Westminster political culture imposed on a constitutional system. Here you have a majority in the House of Representatives, you get your program through, it's done. There you have a majority in the House of Representatives, you don't get your program through, it's dead. And so Washington didn't used to be like that. It used to be really bipartisan. We used to do deals with Republicans all the time. In the first Obama term, we got nothing done with the Republicans, and it was passed because we had a majority in the House and a supermajority of 60 votes in the Senate. Now, she won't have 60 votes in the Senate, which puts a premium, again, if you're going to get rewarded for how you're acting, of making outreach and sort of enforcing them by the reasonableness of your position to say, come, let's reason together. And I really hope the Republicans should understand they will be stronger by doing it instead of fighting this defensive, scorched earth, holy war against middle-of-the-road policies. Now, I know the base doesn't feel that way, but the base is going to keep punishing you unless the answer to the Tea Party and the answer to the Trump people is make America richer again for regular people. And the anger goes away, the bitterness goes away, and all that political energy is channeled into something else. That's the answer. And that's what I think she understands that, and I think that's what she wants to do.
Gee, doing it though, I mean, I think
it's hard
Bob Carr wrote on the weekend about, the things that have made Trump appealing are not going to be gone in 4 years' time.
It's true, but leaders, they know how to do push buttons, and you can push a bad button in somebody, you can push a good button in somebody. And if you push a bad button, I guarantee you will get people angry, and they will be upset, and they will want to absolutely wreak havoc on the political order. But if you push a good button and you say, this is where we can go, and Obama kept pushing good buttons, and his approval rating right now is the highest of it's the highest of the second term, and almost approaching what it was when he was elected. People want that, provided you can deliver on it.
Well, that was the problem though for him, particularly in the first term. I mean, he pushed buttons and wasn't able to get his program through.
She's got to find another key to the lock. And that is the challenge.
And what is that key, do you think?
I think it's finding, you can't solve everything. Okay, they're going to hate Obamacare, but you can fix it, and you can do some things that can help them do it. But there's some needs that are good for Republicans too. Tax reform, which is not just tax breaks for the rich, infrastructure, which is Trump is right. You go to an airport in America, you go to LAX, how does that look? Pretty horrible. And it needs, you take a train from New York to Washington and you look at the tracks, it's terrible. America needs a big rebuilding program. That's good for jobs, it's good for business. And I think that trade can also be done. I think she can renegotiate some trade deals that can provide better wins for everyone. So I do see possibilities, and she certainly believes she has them.
What is it, do you think, that Australians most need to understand about American politics that we just don't have in our culture here?
Well, you already understand to be afraid, very afraid, so that's okay. I think Australia keeps learning lessons about what not to do. So gun control, for example, voluntary, mandatory voting, for example. Moral issues are less a part of the fabric of political discourse here than they are. I mean, abortion is just not, prayer in school are not issues. And I think Americans look on Australia and saying, gosh, this is a really healthy country. And with all the problems that we have and all the tensions that we face, Australia is a fundamentally good country with a good future. And I think people I think Australians sometimes can underappreciate what they have, even with all the challenges and differences that we face.
Is it much more thrilling working in Washington than Canberra?
Oh, I like power wherever you can get it. I think it's really good. When you use it for good. I was fortunate to work in the Congress. Most of the Obama legislative program came through the committee where I worked with this great congressman. He's legendary, one of the great lawmakers of our time, Henry Waxman. And most of the Obama program came through that committee, and to be able to do that and to put that into law was great. And to work in a Prime Minister's office is a very special privilege. And because there's a lot of noise outside that door every day, Just tune it out. You know why you're there. You know who you're serving, the Australian people, and you're working on it. And if you can do some good for lives and make a difference for the better, that's terrific. The airplane is also really nice.
You came here in 91.
91.
So I think who you were running away from in America. Who was...
George H.W. Bush.
Okay.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I didn't have to wait for the second Bush. I thought the first one was...
Well, it's
he
amazing.
looks pretty good now.
They're looking fantastic now.
He's going to vote the way I'm voting.
Yeah.
Come to me.
In fact, he said
he
is, I think. Yeah.
And Barbara. Yeah.
I have to ask the what if, or before I do, what would have to happen now for the momentum to change and for Trump to win this thing?
I think most people have made up their minds in this election, so I don't think there's that much room for maneuver anymore. I guess there would have to be some nuclear revelation about Hillary Clinton that would cause a rethink. And with Trump, I think there have been enough nuclear revelations that people have made up their mind as to whether or not he's temperamentally suited to be president. So again, that plus the view of most Republicans, just take out the Trump hardcore supporters, most Republicans, that she is a qualified person to be president and has the ability to be president, plus that electoral map, plus the machine. That's why I think she should win, have about 50, I don't know if she'll crack 50% of the vote, but I'd say 3 or 4 points in the popular vote and a comfortable win in the Electoral College. And if I'm wrong, you will not see me again or hear from me again. So that's fine. Because you won't invite me back and I wouldn't want to be here, so that's fine.
Oh, I think we'd have to invite you back for
a postmortem?
Yeah.
Okay.
If Trump did win, what would happen? I mean, I know that in Canberra there'd be meetings about this. In every capital in the world there would be, no doubt, just in case.
The short answer is Brexit on steroids, but it would be, I think it would be an extremely disquieting time. And I think people would be beside themselves. On the losing side, they'd be beside themselves. And on a bipartisan basis in Washington, the Washington establishment, Republican establishment, is against Donald Trump. And let's face it. So he's as much a threat to them as he is to the Democratic Party and other people. I actually think, given his character and what he's capable of doing, that he will be impeached in the first term for extra constitutional acts. that people will find unacceptable. So I think there's a high risk of that. And then on foreign policy, already allies are afraid, enemies are, I mean, who does Putin and ISIS want as president? They want Trump. I mean, Putin wants a weak America, and ISIS wants someone who's going to radicalize the Muslim world and to go with them. So they have a stake. This is why WikiLeaks is occurring. This is why they're hacking the Democrats. Putin wants Donald Trump. Let's not forget that. And so they would be pleased. The Iranians would be very pleased. But I think everyone else around the world would be really worried about where the world is going. I don't want to be too alarmist or anything, but that's sort of how I see it. Yeah.
Well, I mean, there's a sense at the moment where we're actually hearing
we keep hearing in the Trump campaign the grown-ups are going to take control. Guess what? He's in control.
If he wanted to run again, God help us, in 4 years, the Republican Party can shut him out, can't they?
Sure they can.
Yeah.
I mean, Lyndon Johnson ultimately could not run for re-election because of unpopularity over the Vietnam War.
Yeah.
Jimmy Carter was beaten after one term. So sure, but Trump, win or lose, but particularly if he loses, poses an existential issue for the Republican Party.
Well, there are little Trumps, aren't there, clipping at his heels?
Yes, but hopefully none as media savvy as he is. But the Republican Party really has to face up to issues as to, is it going to be an inclusive conservative party or an extremist Republican Party? And when they figure that out, then we can know what the landscape of America looks like. But when people like, George Will and other conservative intellectuals abandon the Republican Party because they say it's not our Republican Party anymore, that's pretty profound.
We're going to take questions from the audience, and I'm sure you've got lots, so put your hands up and when the microphone's in it, start talking.
Hi, one question. Just recently I've been reading that if he does lose, then his base is going to be extremely upset. And some of the people behind him and aside of him and so on are saying, well, go out and do what you need to do.
Yeah.
I find that idea very, very concerning. What do you make of that?
There have been hints of violence against her that he has uttered on 2 occasions, which I thought the first time it happened I was shocked, but anyway he got away with it. In those swing states, a lot of the states, if let's say Florida and Ohio go Democratic, those states have Republican governors. And it's the states that control, as you may recall from Florida in 2000, it's the states that control the electoral processes. So if you have Republican governors in key states saying the integrity of our electoral process was correct and the winner was the winner, I think that undercuts a lot of the legitimacy of going against the result. I think we're in a phase of people overreacting to the horrible, which actually will provide an insulating effect as we get closer to Election Day. So, I mean, again, at the end of the day, the numbers are the numbers. If she beats him cleanly in the popular vote, I mean, that's, we look at that here a lot in election results as to the legitimacy of the outcome. So I'm not too worried about it. And again, Republican leaders have every interest in this guy being expunged from their party. So they will be ready to declare him beaten and for the future to get with it.
Thank you very much. Appreciate the presentation. I have a question about the Constitution, and it's about voting.
The answer is 5 to 4.
But I'm always perplexed about why you have this multiplicity of voting systems, the lack of uniformity, and why it isn't part of particularly the Democratic Party's electoral plea to try and reform and unify it.
It really goes back to the founding of the country and just the strong role of the states. So it's embedded in the system, and there's no. I can't see. I don't know if it would take a constitutional amendment to have uniform voting standards in presidential elections. I think it would take constitutional amendment. Very hard to do. So we live with this system. When something horrible like Florida happens in 2000, there are supposedly people watch it and then they hopefully fix it. On the issue of compulsory voting, I think that would be the single best reform that America could ever undertake to cleanse its system. And the way to do it is not from Washington down, it's really from the bottom up. So if, let's say, two states that were, you get your arms around, and that have high civic cultures, and I'm thinking of like Vermont and Utah. If they got together and said, we're going to have compulsory voting for our elections in our states, and people could see the virtues of it, that could be something that lights a fire in other states that would follow suit down the road. And I would love to see that happen.
Obama mentioned compulsory voting when he was in Australia, the appeal of it.
Yeah. No, people love it when they, at first, when you hear about it, you say, are you kidding me? I'm going to blow your head off. But when you really think about it, it's just quite compelling.
I think, sadly, Bruce, it's going to be the opposite problem where we're going to have a threat to it here, big one.
I keep hearing that. It's sort of like, is Test cricket going to end? And the answer is no.
Oh, that's promising. The little quirks of the Constitution are interesting. Of course, if you're wondering why the election is not being held on Cup night, like it usually is, that's also, it's the first Tuesday in November after the first Monday. And that's what's written in the Constitution. But Bruce, you can tell us why.
In 1789, most people were farmers, and the farming was done in November. It was completed by November, so people could turn their minds to civic virtue. And that's why the election is in November. The inauguration of the president used to be in March. Roosevelt was inaugurated in March. There was a fascinating, if you dig up the headline from the front page of the New York Times from that day, in 1933, Roosevelt inaugurated, and then below the fold, Hitler wins big victory in Germany. And it's right there, 1933, and then they're at war 8 years later. It's just amazing.
Next.
Thanks for your speech today. Would you mind going back a few months and just talking about whether Hillary's campaign was affected in any way by Bernie Sanders?
Yes.
Both by numbers and by policy, please.
It was affected by Sanders. He pushed her to the left on issues, and there's no doubt about that, and I think that's good for her. He also pushed her as far as performance, and so, you know, it's sort of like being an athlete. The more you are in the arena, the better you get, hopefully. But she certainly did, and so that improved her. The issue was, again, just given that she's been on the world stage for such a long time, and she's so well known, to keep enthusiasm up, and you could see by the Democratic Convention in July, the enthusiasm was there. And Sanders, to his credit, absolutely endorsed her and is campaigning on college campuses for her. So on the whole, I think Sanders was absolutely a net positive. And you know, the anger isn't only on the right, it's also on the left. The inequality in America, that rich are getting richer, the banks. There are a lot of complaints, bitter complaints that the left has, and she's heard, and her policies have changed, and I think that also has strengthened her appeal. So yes, he had a definite salutary effect. The really interesting question is, how come it was only a 73-year-old guy competing against her? Where is the younger generation of Democratic leaders? And that question is still unanswered. I do not know who they are. And that says a hell of a lot about where the Democratic Party is.
Can you say something about the Supreme Court vacancy?
Yes.
And how quickly that can be filled before impeachment proceedings start against whichever of the two?
Well, let's hope. I don't believe Hillary Clinton will be impeached. We'll save that for Mr. Trump. President Obama nominated a terrifically experienced and well-regarded judge, Merrick Garland, to fill the Scalia seat on the court. I was really shocked when the afternoon that Scalia died, the Republican leader said, we're not going to give a vote on any, we should have an election first before we fill a Supreme Court vacancy.
That was a year out too, wasn't it?
It was unheard of. There's nothing in the Constitution. It is a constitutional responsibility to nominate a successor to the court. But this is Washington today, and so this is what happens. Now, there are some people on the left who say Garland is not progressive enough, and he's certainly not an African American, he's not a woman, he's not an Hispanic American, he's not an Asian American. So she should nominate somebody else when she gets it. I think she will say in the lame duck session, he should be confirmed because, and for Republicans, he's the least offensive liberal jurist that they're going to get. And which is why McConnell, I couldn't understand what the Republicans were doing because they were stopping the chance of an even more liberal justice from being confirmed. So I do think that Garland will get through, which would be great. If not, I don't know whether she would renominate him after supporting him and a vote fails. But that would open the door to other progressive judges, and then several justices are well in their 70s and 80s, and she may well have 2 or 3 more appointments to make. Mm. And the court has been conservative since the Johnson era, going into Nixon, Reagan, and Bush, and through Clinton. The majority has been a moderate to conservative majority. That could now shift, and that could last 30 years. That's another reason why the right is very angry, and they're desperate because they say, my goodness, we're going to lose the Supreme Court in this election too. Very emotional.
With a lack of enthusiasm for the aging establishment of the Republican Party and the Republican Party's own lack of enthusiasm for Trump, how do you see the future of the Republican Party in the next 20, 30 years? Do you think it will survive?
Yes, there's going to be an alternate party. It will be a Republican Party. I just really hope that they can also figure out a way to change the culture, become more responsible in terms of again, having alternatives and differences within a certain system where you're going to get to outcomes instead of just bringing everything to a screeching halt. So I hope so. But Democrats, too, are going to have to, it's so tempting when you have a majority to say, hey, we got it now, and that Westminster culture kicks in, and we don't have to listen to you. Both sides have got to listen to each other. It's just so important. When you have opposition just because of the sake of opposing, so it doesn't matter that you supported the policy you're opposing 3 years ago. I'm now opposing it because the government is for it. That's no good. So we got to do better, and I really hope that we can, and I hope the Republicans can.
It feels like this spectacle has really damaged America to the rest of the world.
That's what really hurts me. I'm an Australian citizen, but I'm an American as well, and it just hurts me in the eyes of the world that the country has just been, its reputation has been shredded. Imagine if you're a Saudi prince and you're watching a Republican candidates debate and Trump is talking about a woman's body. And what the hell are you thinking when you're watching that? You say, I'm going to have this guy. I know how to take this guy out. And I can run my strategy in the Middle East. I don't need you. And then if you're an ally like Australia and you see a candidate say, well, I could go with the nuclear arms race between Korea and China. Or you're in Europe and you say, well, it could be the end of NATO. I think, and he's an isolationist and he's a protectionist. And then this process, I don't know how you felt after the last debate. I needed a shower on Sunday. It's just awful. And I want, so it's extremely disheartening. And she had a hell of a repair job to do when she became Secretary of State after the Bush years and the Iraq War, and she did redeem the popularity of the United States around the world. I think the task is multiple times bigger, and it's going to take longer. But I think Americans like to think we have the greatest democracy on earth. Not this year.
Bruce, I wonder whether you could talk about what's happened to the Tea Party. It seems to have become invisible in this campaign.
No.
Or is it just that Trump has
No, Trump is
over the top of everything?
Trump is the modern expression of the Tea Party. So I think they're all there, and as you can see, it's quite a force. It is, 40% of the Republican Party. It's really something.
He makes Sarah Palin look like a genius, doesn't he?
I long for the days of Sarah Palin. So much easier to beat her.
Hi, you said, let me know if I've misquoted you, but that if Hillary wants to win a second term, or for the Democrats to get a fourth term, it would be important that she was able to achieve some form of bipartisanship.
Yes.
I saw reported this afternoon that John McCain said he's going to block any Supreme Court nominee that she puts up. Isn't a good strategy for the Republicans, if you're right, to just block everything, wait for the next election?
It serves their yes, and that's what they'll tell themselves. We can win the White House in 4 years, and again, the off-year election generally goes against the party in the White House. So a lot of smart people in the Republican Party will say, if we just keep saying no and we dig in and we harden the fortress, we will beat her and we will come back into power. Yes, that is the easy answer to their problems, but I think it's the wrong one. Again, you look at that map, and okay, maybe they can make gains in Congress and so forth, but that map says the country's going to be Democratic for decades. Now, what are they going to do about that?
Could they actually get away with doing that?
Sure. I mean, there's no... it's a risk. Each side has got to elevate itself, elevate the other here. We need a change. We got to change the polarity of where things are going, because it's not serving us well.
What's happened to the religious right in this election? We don't seem to have seen the same. Certainly, the press coverage hasn't been as great.
I think what's really interesting is that the evangelical... Al Trump was able to make big inroads into the evangelical movement, just given his personal history, but he has, although I think there is some rethinking among some evangelicals about it. There are other Republicans who were much more attuned to evangelical movement, like Ted Cruz of Texas, for example. Utah is really interesting because the Mormon church, Mormon Republican, most Mormons are Republican. Mormon Republicans are very unhappy. I mean, Trump, he's so amazing sometimes. He went into Utah, and he said it once or twice, very low, but people caught it. Do you think Mitt Romney's really a Mormon? And I listened to it, and I said, why the hell are you saying that? And he may well lose Utah because of that. And in Nevada, there are a lot of Mormons in Nevada, and I think and Nevada is a swing state, and I think Nevada could go for Clinton, and a Senate race could be affected by that. So, but there is this contradiction of an irreligious man, essentially an irreligious man, having these deep inroads in the evangelical movement. So I can't fully explain it, but such are the mysteries of God.
One more question.
Hi, my question's about the Republican Party going forward.
I think this room is obsessed with the Republican Party. What do you think?
Why wouldn't you be? It's amazing. Where do you see them going in 4 years? Do you see them becoming more fiscal conservatives, such as Paul Ryan, or do you see them becoming more demagogic, like Trump is at the moment? Really, it's looking into the future, which is hard to say given what's going to happen already. But where do you see anyone bring them together, essentially?
I think, we'll see. There is this tension between the Tea Party and Trump and the leadership and Ryan and McConnell and so forth, and that's just going to play out. The DNA of the Republican Party is fiscal conservatism, and they want less spending, lower taxes, less government, less regulation. But again, within those parameters, I think there are dramatic things that can be done to find answers on tax, on spending, on entitlements, Social Security, Medicare, where we really can make progress, but it requires some goodwill on both sides. So she's got to open her arms and say, I want you, and they have to be man enough to say, okay, let's do some business together. I hope so, and I really think that's what's at stake in this election. It's just the future of the free world, what the hell, but I think I really think that's really what's on the line here, and why it is a moment of really strong concern by people of goodwill.
Do you think there are enough people in there that get that?
Yeah, I do. Let me put it this way. If Trump wins, it won't be the country that I know, and that's what scares me. And that's why you have your hopes and your beliefs, but I keep looking at it, and I just think she will win.
Well, on that note, I must say I'm very heartened that you are quite sure, sure as one can be, I suppose, that she will win. I still feel, I think she'll probably win too, but I feel very unsettled still about the whole thing and about what will happen on the 9th of November and the 10th of November, as well as in 4 years and 40 years. But I suppose you go for one thing at a time, and right now that is Donald Trump not becoming president. So
on that bipartisan note,
please thank Bruce Wolpe. Thank you, Bruce.
Thank you.
Visit wheelercentre.com for the best in books, writing and ideas from Melbourne, Australia and the world.